What would you do if one day you suddenly received a large life insurance payout from a husband who had just passed away? Would you keep it to enjoy your later years, buy a new house to start fresh, invest it to secure your future, or simply divide it equally among your children to uphold the sense of fairness? For Karen, that money became a source of deep worry and inner conflict, a chance to help one child who was quietly carrying emotional scars. Even though she knew the decision might make her other child feel left out. What would you do in her place? This was the dilemma Karen faced. A mother who had just lost her husband to a sudden heart attack in the lonely hours of long nights, with grief still raw and unhealed. Karen was confronted with a question that twisted her heart. Does love have to be divided equally to be fair? Or is fairness sometimes about healing the wounds we unknowingly caused? Let us step into Karen's story, to listen to her thoughts, her struggles, and to understand how a sum of money, seemingly material, could ignite the deepest and most complicated emotions within a family. After the devastating shock at the start of 2025. When David, husband, father, and the steady pillar of the family suddenly passed away from a heart attack, several months had gone by. Outsiders might have assumed that enough time had passed for the pain to ease, but for this small family, grief lingered stubbornly, simmering quietly like a wound that refused to heal tonight. Heavy rain poured down over Portland, Oregon, the droplets tapping rhythmically against the windows, making the small house on the quiet street feel colder and lonelier. Inside, the old oak dining table, once filled with laughter, chatter, and the clatter of plates on Sunday mornings, now only echoed with soft, hesitant clinks of silverware. Each sound seemed to punctuate the emptiness that had settled over the house, a constant reminder of what they had lost. At the head of the table sat Karen, 52, quietly observing her children. Her brown hair, streaked with grey, was tied neatly behind her neck, and her blue-grey eyes bore the shadows of sleepless nights and lingering sorrow. Since David's passing, Karen had carried both parental roles, the emotional anchor, the financial provider, the one trying to hold together the pieces of a life that suddenly felt fragile. By day, she ran a small bakery on Alberta Street, a business she and David had built together. That bakery had once been David's pride, where he would stand behind the counter, smiling warmly at every customer. Now, only Karen's quiet figure remained, moving among the ovens and trays of pastries, the absence of David a palpable weight in every corner. Each time she wiped down the counters or heard the soft chime of the doorbell, the silence of the empty bakery pressed against her chest like a stone. Karen's eyes traveled to her two children, the fragments left of David, and she felt both warmth and aching loneliness at the same time, too. Her left, Jake, 25, leaned back in his chair, one ear plugged with headphones, scrolling absently through his phone as if the digital world could shield him from the heavy quiet around him. His face carried a mixture of youthful defiance and the early lines of adulthood. Karen knew well that beneath the stubborn, independent exterior lay a sensitive heart, one shadowed by the feeling that he could never quite measure up to his sister. At 15, Jake had dropped out of school and started working as a postal carrier, taking a path of independence while his peers were still under their parents' protection. Karen had once felt anger and disappointment, but now, every glance at her son filled her with a mixture of sorrow and admiration. He had grown up facing life's harsh realities, resilient but carrying invisible scars that she had never fully known how to soothe. Across from him, Emily, 30, carefully served her mother some food, her soft voice cutting through the heavy silence. "Mum, have a little more. You've lost too much weight." Karen nodded, forcing a smile, though her chest tightened painfully. Emily, intelligent, introspective, and outwardly strong, masked her inner wounds with a composed exterior. 12 years ago, when Emily was just 18, Karen had urged her into college, believing it was the safest, most responsible path. She hadn't seen the shadows of depression that already clung to her daughter. That insistence had forced Emily through years of struggle, student debt, and countless nights grappling with feelings of despair. Now, watching Emily carefully place each bite of food on her mother's plate. Outside the city of Portland, rain pattered steadily against the rooftops, each droplet sliding down the window pane like a quiet drumbeat echoing the persistent sadness of the small house. After a somber dinner, with Jake having retreated to his room, Emily quietly helped her mother clean the kitchen. By the time the counters were wiped clean and the floor swept, the clock neared 10 o'clock. Placing a gentle hand on her mother's shoulder, she spoke softly yet firmly. "Mum, I'm going up to my office for a bit. You should get some rest." Upstairs, Emily's room glowed warmly under the desk lamp, a sharp contrast to the cold grey evening outside. She hung her office jacket, poured a cup of tea, and settled at her familiar desk. Her computer screen lit up the room, and piles of thick files waited for her meticulous review, though she had already spent a long day at the law office. Emily continued to immerse herself in work reading, typing, researching, as if each line of text tethered her to the world and kept her grounded. Since graduating from law school, Emily had been carrying the weight of a massive student debt on her own. Not wanting to burden her mother further or add to the family's financial strain, she chose to work tirelessly, taking extra shifts, handling more cases than her colleagues. Each month, she paid well above the minimum, counting every penny carefully to shorten her journey out of debt. On the outside, she appeared to be a young, successful attorney, calm, professional, confident. But when night fell, the cracks inside her were laid bare in the stillness of the evening. Emily often paused, closing her eyes to stave off the rising tide of anxiety. The depression that had shadowed her since she was 18 never truly left. It only waited for quiet nights like this to resurface. Sometimes her heart pounded in her chest, threatening to break free, and tears silently fell onto the keyboard. To keep herself standing, she relied on her prescribed medication small pills that steadied her mind, giving her the strength to face another day. Yet Emily's life wasn't all work. She had quiet personal pursuits. On rare free afternoons, she enjoyed visiting small art galleries in the city, or spending hours by the window listening to soft jazz. Friends and even her mother had often urged her to open her heart, to give herself a chance at love, to find warmth on those long, cold nights. Occasionally, colleagues suggested casual dinners or light-hearted outings, hoping to coax her into something new. Each time, however, Emily politely declined, not because she didn't crave love, but because, deep inside, her heart had learned to build walls. Since her father's sudden death, she understood how fleeting life could be, how someone you love could vanish without warning, leaving a void nothing could fill. Emily feared that opening herself to someone again might one day result in the same crushing loss, mirroring the grief of losing her father. For Emily, work and family had become her only lifeline. She reminded herself that the files on her desk, the numbers in her accounts, and her mother's quiet, steadfast love were the only things she could trust not to abandon her. *. The $60,000 life insurance payout from David had always been more than money to Karen. It was a tangible piece of her husband she could still hold on to. A final gift from the man she had loved deeply, now gone. From the very first day, Karen considered every possible way to use it. She could invest it to expand her small bakery on the quiet streets of Portland, Oregon, giving herself a cushion for the years when her hands might no longer be strong enough to knead dough and frost cakes. She could save it for future medical bills, for rainy days or sudden illness. Or she could divide it evenly between her two children, Jake and Emily, ensuring fairness so that no one would feel left behind. But the more she thought about it, the heavier her heart became. Since David's sudden passing, she had come to realize that not all pain could be measured by fairness. Some wounds ran deeper, hidden from view, needing care more than equality. Portland's long, rainy nights only magnified the loneliness of the small, cream-colored house. During the day, Karen's bakery buzzed with life, a scent of butter, sugar, and baked goods mingled with the chatter and laughter of customers. But at night, when the ovens cooled and the last customer had left, the emptiness returned with a vengeance. She remembered David, who had once waited in the living room with a cup of tea, greeting her with a smile. Now, only the quiet tick of the wall clock and the shadows stretching across the porch filled the space. Karen often woke in the middle of the night, chest tight, heart heavy. She told herself she was going downstairs for a glass of water, but in truth, she needed a reason to leave the empty bedroom that still echoed with David's absence. One particularly cold, rainy night, as she passed the staircase, she noticed the faint glow from Emily's room upstairs, long after midnight. Initially, she thought Emily was simply catching up on work, but then she realized it had become a nightly pattern. The worry gnawed at her, growing into something she could no longer ignore. She quietly approached the slightly ajar door and peeked inside. Emily sat rigidly in front of her laptop, face pale and tired, illuminated by the harsh blue light. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, but her shoulders trembled. Slowly, she opened a drawer, retrieving a small bottle of pills. Her hand shook as she poured one into her palm, swallowing it with a sip of cold water. Then she lowered her head onto the desk, letting tears fall silently onto the keyboard. Karen froze in shock. Memories of 12 years past flooding back, Malie at 18, struggling in silence with depression. Karen had believed those dark days were behind her, thinking Emily's academic success and professional achievements were proof she had fully recovered. But no, it was a carefully constructed mask, worn to reassure her mother, hiding the exhaustion and emotional burden Emily carried alone. Karen gripped the doorframe tightly, longing to rush in, to wrap her arms around her daughter and whisper, "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." Yet she stayed put, fearing she might startle Emily or shatter the delicate calm she tried to maintain. Only hot tears slid down. That afternoon, Portland was cloaked in a heavy grey sky, clouds hanging low, thick and unyielding. Rain tapped relentlessly against the roof and windows, the kind of rain that made the city feel smaller, quieter, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Emily had just returned from another grueling day at the law office. Her brain buzzed with contract clauses, client memos, and unresolved cases. She felt her shoulders tighten under invisible weight. But then a small ping from her phone interrupted the fog of exhaustion. An email notification. "Your student loan has been paid in full." Emily stared at it, unable to process the words immediately. Her eyes skimmed over the screen again and again, heart pounding in her chest. Years of sacrifices, late nights at her desk, working beyond exhaustion, worrying endlessly about every dollar, now rendered, gone. The impossible relief and disbelief clashed violently in her chest. She didn't even have to ask who was behind this. The answer was clear before she spoke. Her mother, driving home. Her mind raced, tangled with gratitude, confusion, and fear of what such generosity might mean. Rain splattered across the windshield, rhythmically tapping against her windshield wipers. Each drop mirrored the pounding in her chest. She could already picture her mother in the warm, glowing kitchen, stirring something fragrant, perhaps humming softly to herself, as she always did. Pulling into the driveway, the scent of home-cooked food hit her first, and then the warm yellow light spilling through the kitchen window. Karen stood there, slender and slightly hunched, her hair tied back, faint grey streaks visible in the strands. Her hands moved deftly over the vegetables and stove, but Emily could see the weight in her shoulders, the weariness in her stance. Emily's legs moved on their own. She crossed the kitchen floor in 2 strides, grasped her mother's hands, and pulled her toward the living room. Karen followed, her own curiosity and worry dancing in her eyes. Emily's chest heaved, words choking in her throat, trembling as they formed. "Mum, my loan, it's completely paid off. Did you do this?" Karen stopped, looked deep into her daughter's eyes, and felt the weight of this moment pressing down on her chest. The room seemed suspended in time. Even the rain outside softened into a quiet murmur. Finally, she nodded, her voice gentle but resolute. "Yes, Emily. I paid it all." Emily's hands flew to her mouth. Her eyes grew round with disbelief. "Mum, how? Why?" Karen took her hands in hers, feeling the tension, the exhaustion, and the pain that years of work and worry had etched into her daughter. "You've carried so much for so long. I couldn't let you handle this alone anymore. This is for you, Emily. It's the right thing to do." Tears welled up instantly in Emily's eyes. Her body trembled as she stepped into her mother's embrace, wrapping herself around Karen with the force of all the years of hidden stress, fear, and loneliness. Karen's arms closed around her daughter, holding her tightly, letting the sobs escape freely. In that embrace, for the first time in a long while, Emily allowed herself to feel safe and to feel relief without guilt. Yet even amid the comfort, her mind turned to practicalities, to fears, to her brother. "But that's a huge amount. $60,000. Mum, where did you get it?" Karen's throat tightened. She hesitated, searching for words strong enough to contain both truth and reassurance. "It's your father's life insurance. David left it for us. For moments like this, I decided to use it to help you." Emily's breath hitched. The room seemed to tilt slightly. "Dad?" The word escaped as a whisper, almost reverential, almost fearful of breaking the memory itself. She remembered him, the warm smile when he greeted her in the mornings, the quiet evenings with the family around the table, his laughter mingling with hers. Karen nodded, tears pricking her own eyes. Yes, Dad would have wanted this. He always wanted to protect you. Even now, he's still watching over us, in his own way. Emily's tears came freely now. She pressed her face to her mother's shoulder, feeling the reality of her father's absence and the undeniable love that had just saved her. I miss him so much." Her voice broke, raw with longing. Karen hugged her tighter, whispering, "He's still here, Emily, in every memory, in every act of love, in every choice we make. He's still protecting us, in the only way he can. For a long moment, they simply held each other. The room filled with the soft patter of rain and the sound of two hearts beating, synchronized in sorrow and relief. Then Emily's mind shifted. She pulled slightly back, eyes wide and glistening. "Mum, what about Jake? Does he know? Could he feel like you're favoring me?" Karen exhaled slowly, drawing strength. "Jake, he's your brother. I love him just as much. He's never been less important to me than you. But he hasn't carried the same weight you have. He hasn't struggled with the debt, the long nights, the pressure to keep things together after your father passed. He'll understand, eventually. He always understands in his own way." Emily bit her lip, struggling with anxiety. "But what if he's angry? What if he thinks it's unfair?" Karen smiled faintly, brushing a damp strand of hair from her daughter's face. "I trust him. Jake loves you, Emily. This isn't about money. This is about care, about protection, about righting the wrongs that I didn't see before. Sometimes family isn't about splitting everything evenly, it's about knowing who needs help the most." Emily nodded slowly, absorbing the words. She let her tears dry on her cheeks, the storm inside her beginning to settle. I understand, Mum. I'll explain to him, carefully. I want him to know why." Karen's hand stayed on hers, firm, warm, unwavering. "That's all I ask, one step at a time. We'll get through this." Together, they sat there, mother and daughter, in the quiet warmth of the kitchen, the world outside muted by rain and distance. Emily felt the weight lift slightly, replaced with a determination to face the delicate balance of love, fairness, and family. She knew it would not be easy explaining to Jake. There might be anger, misunderstanding, maybe even distance. But for the first time in years, she felt like she wasn't alone. Her mother had finally truly seen her, and acted out of love. For Karen, the embrace was bittersweet. Relief at protecting Emily mixed with guilt over the potential fallout with Jake. She understood that true fairness wasn't always even, it was compassionate. But she worried nonetheless about her son's reaction, about the delicate ties of family strained by loss, by grief, by money, by life itself. And so, in that rainy Portland evening, under the soft glow of lamplight and the patter of persistent rain, mother and daughter held on to each other, finding strength in shared love, and courage to face the difficult conversations that would follow. Jake had just arrived home. The rain had soaked through his jacket and shoes, leaving dark stains along the fabric. He paused in the hallway, catching fragments of conversation drifting through the slightly ajar living room door. Words like "Dad's insurance" and "paid off in full" floated in the air. His pulse quickened, his chest tightened. Blood seemed to pound in his ears. Something was wrong. With a surge of anger, Jake pushed open the door, his eyes burning with confusion and frustration. "What is this?" "Mum, what did you just say about Dad's insurance?" Emily jumped, startled, almost spilling the cup of tea she had just set down. Her body shivered, caught between fear and urgency. "Jake, you're home." He cut her off sharply. "Don't. I've heard enough. Dad's insurance. You used it all to pay off her loans, and what about me? Not a single penny. Mum, do you think that's fair? Do you even see me as your child?" Emily opened her mouth to respond, but her voice faltered under the intensity of his anger. Jake, it's not what you think, not what I think. Jake's laugh was bitter, sharp. All these years, you've always favored her. From school to every little decision, she's always been the one chosen. And now Dad is gone, and this money should have been split evenly between us. What right do you have to decide everything? Karen slowly stood, her heart hammering, her hand instinctively pressed against her chest. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Jake, this isn't spending money, nor is it about favoritism. I used this money to help Emily with the burden she's carried silently for years. This is compensation, not preference. But Jake's eyes blazed and his fists clenched tightly. Compensation? And what about me? All the work I've done, the sacrifices I've made, leaving school at 15, working through rainstorms, saving every penny to help Mum pay bills. Does that not count? Just because she went to college and had debt, you gave her all of Dad's money. Do my efforts mean nothing? Emily stepped forward, tears brimming in her eyes. Jake, please. Don't say that. I never shut up, Emily. Jake's voice cracked, raw and pained. This is between me and Mum. Stop acting like the perfect sister. The room felt suffocating, heavy with tension. Every breath seemed to struggle against the thick atmosphere. Outside, the rain hammered against the windows, mirroring the storm raging inside their hearts. Karen's eyes filled with sorrow as she gazed at her son, a mixture of empathy, helplessness, and love reflected in her gaze. She understood that Jake's anger was rooted not just in jealousy, but in the deep, quiet grief he had been carrying since David's passing, the fear of being overlooked, of being left behind, the ticking of the wall clock, combined with the relentless rain outside, each beat stabbing at their hearts, amplifying the emotional storm. Emily stood frozen, tears streaming silently, afraid that any sudden movement might ignite Jake's anger further. Jake took a deep breath, but it only made his chest heave more violently. He stepped forward, wet shoes squeaking on the hardwood floor. All these years, do you know what I've done for this family? Leaving school at 15, working delivery in rainstorms, saving every cent to help Mum pay bills. And now, just because she had college debt, just because she struggled financially, you gave her all of Dad's money. And what about me? Am I the leftover child? No. Jake, don't say that. Karen cried, her voice shaking but firm. She took a step closer, but Jake recoiled as though any contact might unleash an uncontrollable flood of emotion. You are not the leftover child, Karen whispered, tears welling. I have seen every dollar you've earned, every long night you've worked, every blistered hand from your labor. I cherish it all. But this money, I had to give it to Emily. I feared that if I didn't, she would crumble under the weight of everything she's endured. Do you understand how much she suffered? The nights I woke up to see her room still lit, trembling as she took her medication. Fighting not to collapse, I could not stand by any longer. Jake gritted his teeth, eyes red, voice low but thick with hurt. And me, because I'm stronger. Because I don't cry in front of you, I don't need saving. Emily could no longer contain herself. She stepped forward, pressing her hands against her brother's arms, tears spilling freely. Jake, please. Don't say that. I never wanted Mum to give money to me. I've worked to pay it off, to spare Mum the worry. I know everything you've done for this family. I've never forgotten a single sacrifice. I don't deserve what you've given, nor would I ever take it from you. Jake looked at his sister, eyes filled with anger and pain, a storm of emotions colliding inside him. He shook his head, voice hoarse. You may not want it, but it still happened. She's always the one chosen. Karen stepped forward decisively this time. She grasped Jake's shoulders, looking directly into his eyes. Her gaze was steady, filled with love, determination, and desperation. My son, I didn't choose anyone. I only acted as a mother's heart compels her to protect and hold my children close. If today it were you who needed saving, I wouldn't hesitate. You may be angry, you may blame me, but never think I love you any less than Emily. Never. Her words struck deep. Jake froze, a tremor running through his tear-filled eyes. For a moment, the storm inside seemed to pause, leaving only the quiet, simmering waves of grief and the weight of years spent in silence. Outside, the rain continued its relentless fall, but inside, only the three of them could hear their hearts beating. None knew how to move forward, tangled between love, resentment, sacrifice, and the grief that had yet to fade. After that tense confrontation, Jake turned away and stepped out into the relentless Portland rain. Each step thudded heavily against the wet wooden porch, echoing the storm raging inside him. Karen wanted to call after him, to explain further, to reach through the distance, but he didn't look back. The door slammed shut with a finality that left Emily sobbing in the silence of the small house, her cries filling the empty space with a hollow echo dot in the days that followed. The atmosphere in the house became suffocating, heavier than ever. Jake withdrew into himself, speaking little, spending long hours outside, or isolating himself in his room. The family meals, once a rare but cherished moment of togetherness, were now shadowed by silence, sighs, and a sense of emptiness. Each time Karen saw the empty chair where her son normally sat, her heart seemed to stretch painfully, as though pulled in two directions at once. Emily, despite being filled with gratitude toward her mother, felt a gnawing sense of guilt. The knowledge that receiving the large sum of money had unintentionally created a rift between her mother and brother weighed heavily on her. Memories of past struggles, long nights battling depression, the quiet fear of collapsing without the shield of medication rose unbidden. She found herself lying awake at night, wrestling with the fear that she had somehow become the cause of her family's growing distance. Karen, too, sank into deep contemplation, torn between two pressing responsibilities. On one side was a sense of guilt for having pushed Emily too hard, for sending her down a path of relentless study and work that had demanded sacrifice. On the other side was the responsibility of maintaining fairness in a family already fractured by the sudden death of David. She worried constantly. How could she prevent Jake from feeling overlooked? How could she make him understand that her love for him was as deep and unwavering as for Emily? She remembered the countless nights when Jake returned home late, hands calloused from work, shoulders heavy with responsibility, yet always determined to help both his mother and sister. She knew, even if he never voiced it, that Jake's love for his family was steadfast. He simply expressed it differently, through action rather than words. And yet, she also understood that a significant portion of his anger stemmed from being left out of the conversation about the insurance money. He had felt ignored, as if his voice and opinion didn't matter in a decision of such magnitude. Every family meal became tense. The clink of cutlery on plates, the faint scrape of a chair sound seemed amplified, loaded with unspoken frustration and lingering resentment. Even small words, carefully chosen, hung in the air like fragile glass, easily shattered by the next passing storm of emotion. But deep within, Karen held on to a quiet faith. She believed Jake would eventually understand. He would see that her love for him was not measured by money, but by the countless sacrifices she had made, the sleepless nights, the worry, and the unwavering support she had given both her children. As she watched Emily quietly sit by the window, raindrops racing down the glass in chaotic streams, Karen felt a renewed determination. She would find a way to heal these wounds, even if it took time. Slowly, she told herself, she would bridge the distance between her children, piece by piece, word by word, embrace by embrace, for their family to survive, for the three of them to remain whole. She would not give up. Karen inhaled deeply, letting the scent of rain and damp earth fill her senses. A reminder that storms, no matter how fierce, eventually pass. She glanced at Emily one more time, hands folded, eyes reflecting the grey light outside, and whispered softly to herself, "I will find a way. We will get through this. Together." After that tense confrontation, Jake turned away and stepped out into the relentless Portland rain. Each step thudded heavily against the wet wooden porch, echoing the storm raging inside him. Karen wanted to call after him, to explain further, to reach through the distance, but he didn't look back. The door slammed shut with a finality that left Emily sobbing in the silence of the small house, her cries filling the empty space with a hollow echo. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the house became suffocating, heavier than ever. Jake withdrew into himself, speaking little, spending long hours outside, or isolating himself in his room. The family meals, once a rare but cherished moment of togetherness, were now shadowed by silence, sighs, and a sense of emptiness. Each time Karen saw the empty chair where her son normally sat, her heart seemed to stretch painfully, as though pulled in two directions at once. Emily, despite being filled with gratitude toward her mother, felt a gnawing sense of guilt. The knowledge that receiving the large sum of money had unintentionally created a rift between her mother and brother weighed heavily on her. Memories of past